Welcome to Massive Passive Cash Flow, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hey there, welcome back to the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. I'm Gary Wilson. I'm your host again, and we're glad to have you back. If you haven't done so and you don't mind, if you could please subscribe to the podcast on any one of your favorite channels, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, you name it's out there. And while you're out there, we just created a brand new website called globalinvestoragent.com. And these are the agents I've been telling you about. We don't even like to call them agents. They're more like advisors. They're trained to work with you and I as investors. They're not your typical run-of-the-mill agent. They don't drive Cadillacs and wear suits and high heels. These are real honest to goodness. They're investors themselves, a lot of them. So they get all the access to all the properties all around the country, tools, strategies, methodologies, everything you need, and it doesn't cost you a dime. So go ahead and click on that while you're there. And before that, though, I want you to pay attention here. We got Jay Connor on. So Jay, first off, I just wanted to say thanks for doing this. I know it's been a while, but I've always admired you. I've admired what you're doing for the investing public. So thank you so much for spending your time doing this.
Absolutely, Gary. I'm so excited that you invited me to join you here back on your show and talk about my favorite subject, which is private money.
There you go. Well, let's jump right into it. I know we met 10 years ago at a Dan Kennedy event, and it was a great conversation. And right away, I knew I needed to stay in contact with you. And I did, thank goodness. And I think you introduced me to Ron LeGrand, and the world just took off from there. So let's just jump into the subject. How did you actually get into the private money part of our business? I mean, we all typically start off investing, but I want to hear from your own, if you don't mind sharing that story,
Sure. Well, my wife, Carol Joy, and I, we started investing in single family houses here in Eastern North Carolina full-time in 2003. So quite a few years ago. And so from 2003 until 2009, I used local banks, mortgage companies, traditional lenders, institutional lenders to fund our deals. And I tell you, Gary, I remember it just like it was yesterday. I picked up the telephone. We actually still have telephones, landlines here in North Carolina, but I picked up the telephone to call my banker, and I'd had this conversation with him many times for those first 6 years. I told him I had a couple of deals under contract. They were worth over $100,000 in profit, and told him about them and when I wanted to fund the deals. And I learned very quickly on that conversation that I had lost my lines of credit with no notice. And I also learned that I wasn't the only person in the world. Like all real estate investors during that time were losing their lines of credit. So I hung up the phone and I sat here for a moment and thought, and I developed one of my new mantras at that time, which is, it is impossible for you to fail unless you choose to quit. It's impossible to fail unless you choose to quit. And quitting was not an option for me. So I picked up the phone and I called my friend Jeff, who lived in Greensboro, North Carolina at the time. He was a real estate investor. I told him the story. He said, "Welcome to the club." I said, "What club?" He said, "The club of getting cut off from the banks and losing your lines of credit." He says, "They cut me off last week." I said, "What are we going to do?" He said, "Well, there's this gentleman down in Jacksonville, Florida by the name of Ron LeGrand that can tell us about private money and how to get all the funding that we need for our deals." I said, "Well, what's private money?" Jeff said, "I don't know, but Ron says we can get a lot of it." So I went to my first boot camp all the way back in February of 2009 to learn about private money. And Gary, since that time, I've never missed out on a deal for not having funding. We make the rules. We set the interest rate. It's nothing at all like borrowing money from the banks. And of course, when I say private money, I'm not talking hard money. And, it was a big blessing in disguise. All the growth typically when personally and in your business takes place in the midst of a challenge, in the midst of difficulty. And, it was a blessing in disguise. When I lost my lines of credit at the bank in 2009, in that first 12 months after that, our business actually tripled because I had all this funding from my deals. I could pick and choose the deals I wanted. And, foreclosures were abundant. And so the banks weren't loaning money. but I had all this private money. So I was able to invest in so many foreclosures back in that day because I had all this private money funding. And so today we've got 44 private lenders that are funding our deals, about $8.5 million that we move around from project to project. We're in a small market, only 40,000 people, but we do 2 to 3 deals a month, averaging $71,000 profit per deal.
Wow.
And it's all because of private money.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story leading up to it. I appreciate you sharing that and being candid about it too. I know when the big recession hit, I mean, it was tough on a lot of people, and the people in the commercial world, it was even worse because when a commercial bank calls in a note, it's not necessarily because you didn't pay them. They see risk. Hey, we see risk. We're calling it, and then they all talk to each other, and then it's like that's what happened to Dave Ramsey. It's like a snowball effect. But regardless, getting back to the private money, if we could, for those who really aren't familiar with it, I think they can kind of surmise what it means to be private. But what does it actually look like? Like people, money, feet on the ground. Like how do you find these people? Why aren't they buying themselves? Why would they finance us? That kind of stuff. So people really understand why this is such a big subject to learn right now,
Absolutely. Well, and now is the time to
Mhm.
position yourself because there's two great big categories of foreclosures that are opening up right now, thanks to COVID. You had all those people that were already going into foreclosure prior to COVID. And because of COVID, the moratorium was put on foreclosures. Then you got all those people that have lost their jobs because of COVID. Well, now the moratorium is listed. I just read a couple of weeks ago, we're looking at 166% increase in foreclosures this year. So there's going to be an opportunity to serve a lot of people and help them out of distress, even before it becomes a bank-owned property and actually be able to buy it from them. So in answer to your question, who is a private lender in the context of what we're talking about? Well, a private lender is an individual. It's a human being that loans us real estate investors money from either their investment capital or from their retirement funds. And there's a writer downer right there. I never heard about self-directed IRAs until I learned about private money. And over half of our private lenders are actually using their retirement funds to fund our deals, but they move those funds over to a self-directed IRA company that's IRS approved, where they can truly self-direct, and they earn money that's either tax deferred or tax free, depending on the type of retirement fund that they've got. So, who are these people and where do you find them? Well, they want to be passive investors because they're not interested in, negotiating deals, finding deals. If it needs rehab, they're not interested in rehabbing. They're just simply interested in being passive investors, sitting back, collecting checks automatically, and really not being involved in day-to-day operations. So where do you find them? Well, there's 3 primary categories of private lenders. Where you find them? They are people that are in your warm market. As I say, you've got some kind of association with them, friends, family, business associates. You go to church with them. You're in the Rotary Club with them, et cetera. They're in your cell phone. They're in your email list. They're your Facebook friends, any kind of social media. That's the warm market. And secondly, it's what I call your expanded warm market. I have students tell me sometimes, well, Jay, my warm market is broke. My people don't have any money. Well, first of all, I don't believe them. But secondly, you should learn how to expand your network. And I teach that. And then thirdly, private lenders are existing private lenders. Those are individuals that are already loaning out money to other real estate investors that are doing it, and they have been doing it. But across the board, we're talking about doing business with individuals.
Yeah, I like it. It's funny you mentioned the people that sell all my friends, everybody's broke. My family is from the Carolinas, North and South Carolina. We used to have this joke that the poor folks are trying to look rich and the rich folks are trying to look poor. So, in any case, now as far as structure, like when we go to traditional bank, the bank's going to drop a note in a mortgage, and so the mortgage ties the note to the property. and so forth. Is it the same kind of thing with private money? Is it easier, more complex, or is it what does that part of it entail?
Well, it's a whole lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So the private lenders that we're talking about doing business with, we're not joint venturing. So, one business model is if you joint venture with a lender, they we share in the profits. But in my world of private money, we don't joint venture. We are working with the private lenders, and they act in the same capacity as the local bank. So they get the same protection as a local bank. We don't borrow unsecured money. All of the money that they loan to us is secured by the real estate that we are purchasing. Okay. So we're not raising money for a syndication. Everything we do is what's called a one-off. We've got a property that we want to buy, and we've got a private lender or more than one private lenders that want to fund that transaction, and they get a mortgage or a deed of trust, depending on the state that the property's in. And so every note that we do, every deal that we borrow money on, the note is collateralized and backed by the real estate.
Excellent. So what's really interesting here is we're really just, I wouldn't say cutting out the commercial lending business. It's an alternative, and it turns out it's a very good alternative because I've actually done it myself. So everybody listening, this isn't something that's theory. I mean, yours truly here has actually done it too. I've been on both ends of it. So I love the fact that you're doing it one off and you're not trying to raise money first and then go find a property, or you're not trying to find a property and trying to get 10 people involved. It's really more personal. And I think people like that, particularly the lender feels a sense of security knowing they're dealing with one person and one property, and it's probably right down the road, So now, having said that, as I was saying, I was thinking, okay, what about people from other states? So like, can somebody from New York State be one of your private lenders, or how does that whole thing work? Is this a national scale type of thing that you're doing, or kind of fill us in there a little bit if you don't mind,
Yes, it is. Carol, Joy, and I actually have got private lenders in 10 different states, but all of our properties that we invest in are right here in our small area of 40,000 people in Eastern North Carolina. And that's one of the reasons I love private money. And there's a long list of reasons why I absolutely love private money. One of which is we're not limited to the number of private lenders that we can do business with, and we're not limited to the number of deals that we can do simultaneously. When I was borrowing money from the banks, there was a limit to the amount of money I could have borrowed at any given time. And there'd be a limit to the number of deals that I could have going on simultaneously. Well, in this world of private money, it just like takes the handcuffs off of us and gives us so much more freedom. The reason we can borrow from any private lender in any state, regardless of where we're doing business, is because us as individuals and private lenders as individuals, we are not regulated by the commissioner of banks. If you borrow from an institutional lender, a mortgage company, they have to be licensed to do business in that state to loan money. But when you're doing business with individuals, you can do it with as many people as you want across state lines, and everything is all good to go because it's a simple transaction between the lender, the private lender, and us, the borrower, with no middle person or no brokerage involved in the middle.
Yeah, I love it. What's interesting is I'm thinking of all the people that you and I both know, and that my wheels are spinning. I mean, I'm not it's like I just injected some kind of shot of adrenaline directly into my brain. So thinking all kinds of possibilities. So you're in North Carolina, and for everybody listening, I want you to hear this, and please remember this. One of the things I like about Jay is he's actually from the area where he currently lives, right? He and I were talking about before the podcast. We were joking because we both had our cell phone numbers. It was my number after 30 years. It's the same one I've had since cell phones came out.
So is mine.
There you go, man. There's stability there. There's security there. There's comfort there. So what's cool about this is you're dealing with bar lenders, from multiple locations. So for the folks listening, let's say they're in Indiana or Georgia or Utah or whatever, can they do the same thing there? Is this the kind of thing that you can help them with? Because maybe they know people in California are like, you know what, I'm not spending a dime out here. I'm going to invest with the guy investing in Utah and Nevada and Colorado right now because it's so much easier and better. Is all that, does geography really matter so much? Or kind of, if you don't mind touching on that subject a little bit, on the other end of it? Yeah.
The main thing that matters is the relationship. That's the main thing that matters, is the relationship between the private lender and us, the borrower. So now, as far as my properties go, I just like to invest in properties that I can actually drive by and look at myself. I've rehabbed a little over 450 houses now, just here in this local area over all these years. But the private lenders, we got some private lenders right here in our own hometown, but we got private lenders in Texas, you know, and everything in between, down in Florida, you name it, they're from all over. So again, the private lender does not have to be right there in the same state or area where you are investing.
I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for participating in the Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast. Also wanted to let you know that the book Global Investor Agent is officially out in print and in Kindle on Amazon. You can get it by clicking on the link right here. If you are an agent, definitely grab yourself a copy. This book, guys, was not just written by me. I also included 8 other investor agents from around the country. And I didn't just handpick them. I literally opened it up to the entire audience, and it was first come, first serve. So you're going to get feedback from brand new agents all the way up to top 25 team leaders. Some on my team, some are not on my team, with valuable insight and instructions and guidance and actual checklists to follow to not just survive, but thrive in this market. I know you're looking for that advantage, and this is it. By the way, if you are an investor, grab a copy for your agent. And for everybody, all profits from the sale of the book, Kindle and print, all go to the Healing House Foundation, 100%. Thank you for doing that too, guys. Let's get back to the show.
Excellent. I love it. Now, I want to touch on a really important subject. We kind of talked about being timely, and right now, as this is so important, is the timeliness of all this and this interview, because, you know, since January 3rd, the first business day of the year, I saw what happened on Wall Street. I'm hopefully got lots of gas left in the tank, but I'm 59. This is my 5th market cycle getting ready to turn here. Actually, I think it's already started to turn. And the market right away took a nosedive. And I thought, you know what? I've seen this before. I've seen the movie. I'm going to go ahead and get my money out of the more riskier stuff and put it in something more stable and be able to lend and buy when the opportunity is right. And then sure enough, a few months back, it had a major drop. And then you saw we're gonna time this podcast now, but last Friday and Monday, it was a free fall, and the Fed just raised interest rates another 0.75 of a point. So anybody who's been around long enough knows that we're going into a correction. I don't care what the circumstances are. The fundamentals never change. It's like the natural law of the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. So when it comes to timeliness, to me, you know, if I'm an investor and a borrower, this is when I want to talk to the private investors. I know people are thinking, well, I got a great relationship with my bank, but you and I just saw last recession that they're gonna get the institutional lenders. They're gonna tighten up. They're not gonna, believe me, it's not gonna be like the heyday of the old in the early 2000s. But as far as timing, what have you noticed in your lifetime as far as private money when an up market, private money in a down market or a transitioning market? I mean, how does that play into things? You know.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Gary, and I'll tell you why. Excuse me. When COVID first started coming along in March of 2020, the hard money lenders, and of course, we're not talking hard money in this world, but the hard money lenders, they shut down totally. They didn't loan out anything because of that nasty 4-letter word that starts with an F, which is fear. Right. So, but here's what's interesting, and I really can't tell you why. I got a good guess though. Since COVID started, I've had more private money chasing me than I've ever had before. And I think the reason for that is, number one, since the current administration took office, there's been more money printed in the basement of the White House in this short period of time than ever before. There's so much money. There's so much liquidity out there on the street. In fact, I just read an article last week that there is 39 trillion with a T, $39 trillion just in retirement funds. I'm talking pensions, 401ks, et cetera, $39 trillion in cash sitting on the sidelines because people don't know what to do with it. So they hear about my private lending program and they just start even chasing me even more. So there's just so much liquidity out there. So, you know, when banks start tightening up, it's the same thing that happened to me in 2009. When the banks were tightening up, people that had liquidity were looking for a safe and secure place to put their money. The stock market was crazy volatile back then. The stock market is crazy volatile right now, and people don't like that volatility. They don't like that risk. They're looking for something that's safe and secure. And so in this private lending program, it is safe and secure. And here's how and why. First of all, in this program, number one, it is safe because I typically don't borrow more than 75% of the after repaired value. I did not say 75% of the purchase price.
Right.
I said 75% of the after repaired value. You see, we buy houses at deeply discounted prices because there's always distressed properties. I don't care what the market is. So I always bring home a big, huge check every time I buy. I mean, it's not unusual for me to bring home a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 check when I buy and bring no money of my own to the closing table. So in this program, it's safe and it is secure because we're not borrowing unsecured money. It's backed by the real estate. Now, let's say we have a correction, not only in the stock market, but also in the real estate market. Well, I had a very, very smart, much smarter fellow than me on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, an economist. And he says, yes, we are walking into a recession right now, but we're not walking into a real estate recession. He says, because of supply and demand, at least for the next year or two, because of inventory, supply and demand, there is no inventory, right? And regardless of what mortgage rates are doing, if you've got a small amount of inventory and you've got big demand, then you're still going to see prices continue to go up, at least for the next year or two, according to my smart economist. And I tend to agree. Here in Eastern North Carolina, I mean, even today, you put a house on the market like I'm going to tonight at midnight. I promise you by tomorrow in 24 hours, I'll have over 10 showings and 5 offers in a small area of 40,000 people. But all that being said, what is the lesson learned? All that being said, regardless of what, no matter whose crystal ball you're listening to, cash is always king. And when you have private money, cash sitting on the shelf, ready to be deployed in a program where you made the rules, you set the interest rate, you set the term, you set the frequency of payments, it puts you so much more in control. It fixes your cash flow problem and puts you in the driver's seat of your business. You know, one thing that's interesting, Gary, is I tell people all the time, in all these years of private money, I have never asked anybody for money. And they said, Jay, how do you have all that private money if you never ask anybody for money? It's simple. I put on my teacher hat and I teach people what private money is, what self-directed IRAs are, and now they're chasing me. I've never asked for any money. I teach them the program. And I got a big problem right now, Gary, big problem, and it's a good problem. I got so much money sitting on the shelf from private lenders that I'm trying to put back to work that I just can't even find enough deals to put the money to work. That's a lot better problem than having these deals you want to fund and you have no way to fund the deals.
Yep. I'll introduce you to some of our investor agents. They're really good at researching and finding the right owners of the right properties. And it's amazing the stuff. And it's funny, they're all licensed, they're licensed agents, of course. When, NAR, National Association of Realtors, publishes their data every year. Our team outproduced NAR this last quarter by a factor of 2 to 1, like literally pound for pound. Our team outproduced more volume, more transactions than all of NAR. But it's because most agents don't know how to do this stuff. I mean, we know how to identify how long somebody has owned the property, how much debt they have, or if they have no debt, how long they've had the debt, or they paid their property taxes. We get all the usual bankruptcy, foreclosure, probate stuff like most people can get, but we have actual data aggregators that go into the county records real time to get this stuff. So I'll introduce you to these guys. In fact, I'm going to put this on the public announcement. I'm going to have you teach a class. If you're okay with it, I'll have you come on and be a guest teacher to talk about this very subject to the very people whose clients are mostly investors all over the country.
I'd love to. I think
it'll be Christmas time for Jay. But in any case, well, actually, I know we're getting close here, but so let's say somebody, they really do want to learn. Everybody listening, the secret to success starts with education. You got to have the right education. Then you got to get the right information. And the cool thing about the right education, it shows you how to get and use the right information, and then you take right action, and then you're going to get the right results. I'm pretty sure, Jay, in your program, you not only give them the right education, there's probably a lot of good information they need to have, and I'm sure it shows them how to identify and get that too,
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I'm so excited, Gary. I just recently finished writing my brand new private money guide. Nice. And I'd love to give it away absolutely free, to your followers.
Let's do it. So I think let me tell me if I wrote this down correctly. I've got jconnor.com/money guide. Is that correct?
That's it. In fact, the title of this is 7 reasons why private money will skyrocket your real estate investing business and help you build incredible wealth. And this guide, I don't care if you're a brand new real estate investor or you're a seasoned real estate investor looking for more private money, cheap, or if you're a wholesaler and you've never stayed in a deal because you didn't have the funding, this private money guide will put you on the fast track, put you in control, get you a lot of private money very, very quickly. It's absolutely free. You can download it right to your laptop or your computer, again, at www.jconner.com/money guide. And yes, I'm an ER, not an OR.
Yeah, I'm glad I was going to mention that too. Thank you for doing that. And I'm going to get mine tonight because I've got a flight this weekend. I got a 2.5 hours on Saturday and Sunday each. So I'm gonna get my guide and read it on the plane. But I really appreciate you doing that. I didn't expect you to give something away like that. And I saw it. That's not like a little pamphlet. That's an actual manual. So everybody listening here, this is the real deal. And make sure you grab it, because this is one of those times in life where opportunity knocks and you absolutely say yes. I love Richard Branson's famous quote when he was interviewed, and the guy asked him, what's really your number one secret to success? He said, you know what? I said yes to every opportunity came my way, and I figured out how, and any human being can do the same thing. When you've got leaders and guides, think of Jay as your guide, and Jay's going to make you the hero. Whether you're an investor or you're an agent working with investors, this is a gold mine. How'd you like to be able to go to any investor and say, look, I'm not really so much concerned about your credit score and your debt coverage ratio, all that stuff. I can help you get private money. Who do you think those investors are going to work with?
Exactly.
Yep, exactly. So let's do this. I know we got about a minute to go, and you can pull this from your material or your own life's experiences. What would you say for somebody looking to start out on this venture? Let's say there's an agent in California where things are just crazy out there, price wise and lending and everything else, and they want to learn from you and basically be you, but in their own small town in California. What's the first 3 things you would recommend that they do?
Sure. Well, first of all, I practice and I teach for years. The money comes first. The money comes first. And here's what I mean by that, Gary. I've heard it said by other people, oh, just go get a deal under contract. The money will show up. And I go, like, where from? I mean, is the money just going to like rain out of clouds? And look, I've got good friends that teach what we call the terms business, buying houses creatively with seller financing, subject to the existing note, buying on a wrap, and all that kind of stuff. And that stuff works. But I know in the real world, through my statistics, only 13% of for sale by owners will sell creatively without requiring all the cash. The other 87% require all the money. So when someone focuses on getting the private money lined up first, and it doesn't take long, it's easy to get $500,000 or more pledged and ready to go in less than 30 days when they just plug in to, the education that shows how to do it. So number one, focus on getting the money lined up first.
Yep.
Secondly, do not do your first deal on your own. Either have a mentor, a coach, joint venture with somebody that has been through, the mines that might blow you up. Mm-hmm. So work with somebody, that is experienced. Thirdly, stay involved and connected with a group of like-minded people, other real estate investors that are experienced. My wife, Carol Joy, and I, we're in 4 mastermind groups, not including the one that I run of real estate investors. So always keep your hat on of your wanting to learn, always be hungry to learning what is the new strategies for locating, motivated sellers, motivated sellers, and et cetera. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would recommend first.
Well, Jay, I appreciate that. And I really appreciate this entire session. I know we just went slightly over. They always tell you a half hour, but you know what? I don't think a single person turned off the radio. And for those of you who are listening, please do the right thing. Leave a review for this podcast for Jay, because he really is one of the true gentlemen in this business. I've known him for 10 years. I've never heard anything ever in a negative way about him. It's always been 100% positive, and he has a great subject. It's a niche subject, and it's something extremely vital, particularly in this economy. So if you could leave a review, that's the currency of podcasts. That's what makes podcasts go around. And while you're out there online doing that review, make sure you go to jayconner.com. It's Connor with the ER, not an OR, right? /money guide. Okay. Get that. And after you do that, go over to globalinvestoragent.com. And if you're an agent, click on the button to have a conversation, because I'm thinking you're gathering. You need to make this part of your model. And for everybody else, go ahead and grab one of the agents that's already out there. We call them advisors, right? Because they know how to help you succeed. One of your partners in this business is the person that's going to help you find a deal. So everybody, listen, I want you to take care of yourselves. God bless you and your families. We'll see you on the next podcast. And Jay, thank you again also.
Gary, God bless you. God bless your listeners. I love your heart. And here's to all the success of all your followers. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, we'll see you on the next Massive Passive Cash Flow podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Massive Passive Cash Flow. Be sure to go to realestatewithgarywilson.com to join our community and start building wealth today.